The city does not sleep, but it pretends to. At 6:47 in the morning, the glass tower that houses Ashveil Capital catches the first gray light of dawn and throws it back at the street below in long, fractured angles. Sofia Vane notices this every morning from the sidewalk, not because she finds it beautiful, though she does, marginally, but because reflection patterns shift with cloud cover and elevation. And Sofia has spent 2 years learning to read patterns the way other people read facial expressions. It is a habit she cannot turn off. Numbers, behavioral sequences, the way a conversation realigns itself the moment a particular person walks through a door. She reads them all. She files them. She rarely speaks about what she finds. She arrives before the cleaning crew finishes. She leaves after the security guard on the 43rd floor stops bothering to check her badge when he hears the elevator chime. In between, she produces work that is precise, exhaustive, and largely invisible. Filed under her supervisor's name in the shared drives, referenced in board summaries that do not include her initials, presented in meetings she is not invited to attend. The analysis is hers. The attribution is not. This is not unusual. This is the operating model of every junior analyst here in every institution like this one, and Sofia has never been naive enough to build her expectations on something as fragile as fairness. She is 27 years old. She has a desk near a structural column that blocks her view of the windows. She has a coffee mug with a crack along the handle that she keeps meaning to replace and never does. She has a brother named James who, 2 years ago, mentioned her name to someone who mentioned her name to someone else, which led to a formal interview, and then a job offer at a company she had spent months trying to reach from the outside. For that chain of coincidences, she has never stopped feeling quietly, stubbornly grateful. James is 4 years older and considerably less organized than Sofia. He navigates people the way she navigates data, with an ease that looks effortless from the outside and probably costs something she cannot measure from where she stands. He knows people. He has always known people. She has always attributed it to personality and proximity, to simply being the kind of person who ends up in the right rooms by nature. She thinks about him sometimes when she arrives at this building in the early dark, badge in hand, the city still half asleep at her back. She thinks, at least someone opened a door. She does not know, yet, what was waiting on the other side of it. The conference room on the 52nd floor is called the Meridian, a name chosen, Sofia has always suspected, because it sounds like the middle of something important, the point of highest altitude before the long descent. The room earns it. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides, a table long enough to seat 30, with room for the inevitable overflow, lighting calibrated to the specific color temperature that makes quarterly projections look marginally more optimistic than the underlying data supports. Sofia has been inside the Meridian exactly twice in 2 years. The first time was her onboarding tour, when a junior HR coordinator gestured at the panoramic windows and said something about the view that Sofia immediately forgot, because she was calculating the square footage relative to the number of people listed on the relevant floor. The second time was 3 weeks ago, when she dropped off printed copies of the preliminary acquisition brief before the senior team arrived. She placed the folders at each seat in alphabetical order by surname, because that was how the attendee list was organized and there was no reason to do it any other way. Both times, she entered through the service corridor. Today, she enters through the main door. Her supervisor is a man named Garrett, soft-spoken in the way of people who have spent years managing downward without being managed upward, and he finds Sofia in the hallway outside the 43rd floor 12 minutes before the session begins. He explains the arrangement with the practiced ease of someone delivering it in a slightly different configuration for the 3rd or 4th time. The primary presentation, Sofia's analysis, the 6-week acquisition risk framework she built from raw transaction data, will be handled by Mara Calloway, Senior Director of Strategic Development. Sofia's role is supplementary. She will be present to field technical questions if the committee requires it. She should view this as exposure. Direct board contact at her level is, Garrett says with the generosity of a man bestowing a gift he did not pay for, uncommon. Sofia looks at him. She says, "Of course." She says it with the expression she has been refining for 2 years. Open, measured, professionally accommodating. It uses no muscles above her cheekbones and costs her nothing anymore. She takes the elevator to 52 and steps into the Meridian. The 40 chairs fill with the specific texture of institutional authority. Senior partners in dark wool, 2 directors who flew in from the European offices overnight, the full acquisition review committee in formal configuration. These are people who have each other's numbers saved under first names, who speak in the shorthand of long professional proximity, who know without looking which seat at this table has the slight wobble on the left leg. They are not hostile to Sofia. They simply do not register her. She is furniture in this room until she is useful. And then she will be useful. And then she will be furniture again. She opens her folio, straightens pages that do not need straightening, positions herself slightly behind the window glare, where eye contact becomes difficult by geometry rather than choice. She waits. Mara Calloway enters last. There is a specific architecture to the way certain people move through rooms, not speed or size, but the quality of expectation that precedes them. Mara carries hers with the ease of someone who stopped thinking about it long ago. She is composed in cream-tailored wool, platinum hair swept back without a strand misaligned, and she approaches the podium at the room's head as though it had been built specifically for her to stand behind. Her eyes are pale gray and steady, and they move across the assembled committee with the calm of something that has already calculated the outcome of this meeting, and is now simply watching the formality of its unfolding. She opens with Sofia's framework. Not an interpretation, not an adaptation for a different audience. The exact structure, the 3-phase risk model, the weighted acquisition index that required 11 days of iterative calibration, the non-standard correlation matrix that Garrett had flagged as unnecessarily complex in a marginal note, and that Sofia had defended in 3 separate written memos before he dropped the objection. Every variable, every adjusted threshold, every decision Sofia made about the data and why, transmitting now from Mara's voice as though it had originated there, as though it had always been there, waiting for the right set of hands. Mara's name is on the title slide. Sofia watches from the end of the table. She keeps her face entirely still. She is exceptional at keeping her face still. She has had to be. She waits through the first slide, the second. On the third, the correlation matrix, the piece of work most specifically and unmistakably hers. She raises her hand. 2 seats to her left, Garrett goes rigid. The attribution on that slide is incorrect. Her voice is level, factual. The exact tone she uses when she catches a rounding error in a balance sheet. Not a performance of emotion, simply the sound of someone correcting the record. I built that framework. I can walk the committee through the methodology if it would be useful to the presentation. The silence that follows is not the silence of a room considering what it just heard. It is the silence of a room deciding how to categorize a disruption. Mara turns from the podium. Her expression does not move. Not by a single, measurable degree. It holds precisely where it was, calibrated to the fraction of a second. She smiles with only her mouth. The way marble smiles, a shape with no temperature behind it. Miss Vane has been part of the support team on this project, she says, addressing the committee rather than Sofia, as though Sofia has already been discussed in a prior conversation, sorted and noted and set aside. Her contributions have been factored into the broader analysis, as is standard for junior staff. A pause, brief and perfectly weighted. I understand it can be difficult, at this stage of a career, to distinguish between individual contribution and collaborative output. There it is. Not a contradiction. Not even a dismissal. A taxonomy. Sofia filed neatly into the category of people whose professional perception is slightly, sympathetically imprecise. Someone who means well. Someone who overestimates. Someone the room should acknowledge with patience and then move past. 23 pairs of eyes slide toward Sofia and then back to the podium. She opens her mouth. The correlation matrix. Miss Vane. Garrett's voice is barely above a breath. Technically not an interruption because it does not constitute words. The door opens. Dorian Ashveil does not walk into rooms. He arrives in them. The way a change in atmospheric pressure arrives before a storm. Felt before it is named. Understood before it is explained. He is tall in the way that certain structures are tall. Not just measurement, but proportion. broad through the shoulders with the kind of deliberate solidity that belongs to something built for sustained load rather than performance. Dark suit, no tie. The collar of a charcoal shirt open at the throat with the ease of someone for whom ceremony is a tool rather than an obligation. His black hair is pushed back from his face with complete indifference, and the jaw beneath is compressed and angular. High cheekbones, a hard line from ear to chin, a narrow scar below his left jaw old enough to have faded to silver. His eyes, deep jade green, and reading as nearly black under the meridian's recessed lighting, move across the room with the focused economy of a scan rather than a glance. Not observing, assessing. He takes a chair at the secondary table. Not the podium, not the seat of formal authority. The position from which every person in the room is simultaneously visible, and none of them are required to look back. Sofia notes, with the part of her mind that notes such things without being asked. She does not know which door he came through. Mara continues. The room adjusts, imperceptible to most, not to Sofia, who has been reading posture and proximity for 2 years and knows what deference looks like when it is performed by bodies rather than announced in words. Spines microscopically straighter, voices held at a slightly more controlled register, the collective organism of institutional power reorienting around a new center of gravity, without appearing to move at all. Dorian does not look at Mara. He looks at the slides. Then he speaks. One question, delivered flat and unhurried, like a stone placed into water by someone who already knows the geometry of the ripples, the variance in the weighted index. His eyes remain on the screen. Slide 9. Walk me through the logic of the correlation window. Mara's response arrives a half-beat late. The fraction of a second is nearly nothing. Nearly. The window was selected based on industry standard para. The 18-month window accounts for cyclical distortion in the target sector. Sofia hears her own voice and does not fully decide to speak before speaking. It is reflex, the same involuntary precision that supplies an answer the moment the right variables appear. The numbers are hers. She knows what they mean. She cannot not answer. A standard 24-month window makes the correlation appear stable, she continues. But there were 2 anomalous quarters in the dataset, Q3 and Q1 of the prior cycle, that would artificially inflate the correlation strength by approximately 14%. The 18-month window isolates clean data. The room is quiet. Dorian looks at her, not the way it looked at her when she raised her hand. That brief, categorizing glance of a room filing away an inconvenience. This is different. He looks at her with the quality of attention that carries no social performance in it, no calculation of how it will land. He simply looks, with the specific stillness of someone who has located something they were not certain would be there. 3 seconds. Then he looks back at the screen. Continue, he says. Not to Mara, to the room. The session closes 40 minutes later. Mara steps away from the podium into a current of senior partners and international directors, and the structure of her authority reconstitutes itself around her as seamlessly as water closing over a stone. Sofia's interruption absorbed, dissolved, leaving no visible mark on the surface. Garrett finds Sofia at the elevator bank before the doors open. My office. The warning takes 11 minutes. Behavior inconsistent with the collaborative culture of Ashveil Capital. Poor judgment regarding the appropriate moment for professional interjection. He uses the phrase professional optics twice and chain of communication once. Sofia sits with her folio in her lap and listens in the specific mode she uses when she needs to record something accurately for a later purpose. Not for response, but for evidence. Her hands are folded. Her expression is the expression she has been building for 2 years. Understood, she says when he finishes. She signs nothing. There is nothing to sign. It is a verbal warning, which means it lives entirely in Garrett's memory, and whatever entry he makes in her personnel file before he leaves tonight. She takes the elevator back to her floor. She sits at her desk. She opens the transaction file she had been analyzing before the session, and works through it with the same focused precision she brings to everything, clean and methodical and relentless, until the cleaning crew begins its second pass, and every desk on the 43rd floor has gone dark, except hers. She does not see the man who pauses, at 5:32 in the afternoon, outside the glass partition of her floor on his way to the executive elevator. She does not see him stand there long enough to look at the single-lit desk in the empty room. The woman at it, head down, the small arc of her lamp catching the dark fall of her hair. She does not hear the phone call he places before the elevator doors close. One sentence, directed to the head of human resources, ended before the other person has finished their greeting. She does not see any of it. What she carries home through the cold November dark is smaller and sharper than any of that. A splinter of something, lodged too precisely to be dismissed. I built that framework. She had said it out loud in a room full of people whose names appear on things they did not build, and the room had tried to sort her into a category that would neutralize the inconvenience of her being right. And then someone had looked at her. 3 seconds, flat and certain, with the stillness of a man locating something real, as though she were the only accurate thing in the room. She files it. She files everything. She does not yet know what it means that, for the first time in 2 years, she cannot find the right folder for it. The memo arrives before Sofia does. She steps off the elevator at 6:51 in the morning to find Garrett already at his desk. Unusual, since Garrett typically arrives at 8:15 with a travel mug that he refills precisely twice before lunch. He is not reading. He is sitting with both palms flat on the surface of his desk, in the manner of a man who has recently been informed of something that redistributed his understanding of several prior assumptions, and has not yet finished rearranging them into a form he can functionally carry. He looks up when he hears the elevator chime. He says her name once. He says it with the specific, careful flatness of someone who has decided, in advance, to perform neutrality. There's been a reallocation, he tells her. Effective today. You've been transferred to the 56th floor. Direct assignment under the Executive Operations Division. He pauses. Under Mr. Ashveil's supervision. Sofia does not move. Garrett produces a printed form, a single sheet, already filled out, bearing the signature block of the Chief of Human Resources and, above it, a notation that reads Executive Authorization in a font 3 points smaller than everything else on the page, as though the document is slightly embarrassed by its own hierarchy. There is no explanation column. There is no space for one. The form was clearly not designed with the expectation that this kind of transfer would require justification. Your security clearance has been updated, Garrett says. It will issue new access credentials by 9. Sofia takes the form. She looks at it. The signature is dated yesterday afternoon, 5:34 p.m., according to the timestamp in the lower corner, 2 minutes after her verbal warning ended. She does not say what she is thinking. She says, "Where do I bring my materials?" Garrett tells her. She goes back to her desk, opens the bottom drawer, removes the personal items she has accumulated in 2 years, 3 pens, a backup charging cable, a small bottle of hand lotion with the cap replaced upside down to keep the pump from activating in her bag, and places them in her folio with the orderly care of someone who has done this before and does not intend to make it mean anything more than it is. She does not look back at Garrett's office when she steps into the elevator. She watches the floor numbers climb. The 56th floor has a different quality of silence than the 43rd. Below, silence is the absence of conversation, the compressed hush of people who have learned to move carefully around each other in the specific topology of shared subordination. Here, it is something else. The kind of silence that exists in places where decisions are made, and the making of them does not require permission. Wide corridors with no surplus furniture. Conference rooms with frosted glass that catches light without releasing it. A reception desk staffed by a woman who looks up at Sofia with an expression of mild professional acknowledgement that contains absolutely no surprise. A man named Aldrich, who introduces himself only by first name, and whose position Sofia cannot immediately categorize, walks her to an office at the end of the eastern corridor. It is larger than her previous workspace by a factor that she will later calculate at approximately 3.4. The desk is clean. The monitor is new. There is no crack in the coffee mug, because there is no mug. There is a card on the desk with the floor's internal kitchen extension written in clean, even handwriting. Aldrich tells her she'll be briefed by Mr. Ashveil at 10. He closes the door quietly on his way out. Sofia sits down, powers on the monitor, and spends the next hour and 4 minutes reviewing every accessible document attached to her new clearance level. Not out of anxiety, but because she is constitutionally incapable of entering an unknown environment without mapping it first. By 9:17, she has a functional understanding of the project's scope. By 9:40, she has 3 questions she already knows the answers to, and 1 she does not. At 10 o'clock exactly, the office door opens without a knock. Dorian Ashveil in a conference room full of institutional authority, and Dorian Ashveil 4 feet from her desk are not meaningfully different, which is itself a notable data point. He does not adjust his register for proximity. He does not modulate downward to something warmer or more conversational. He arrives at the same frequency he occupied in the meridian, that absolute, unhurried stillness, and he sets a single folder on the corner of her desk and says, "The Carver Group acquisition, Phase 2 risk assessment. I want a full structural analysis by Thursday." Sofia looks at the folder, then at him. Thursday is 3 days. Yes. The Phase 1 data alone is substantial. I know what it is. He watches her with those dark jade eyes that read as nearly opaque in the gray morning light from the windows. "You already reviewed the accessible materials this morning." Not a question. "You have a methodology question about the variance threshold on the secondary asset pool." Still not a question. She opens her mouth, closes it, opens it again. The threshold in the Phase 1 brief is set at 12%. Given the sector, I'd run it at 9. Run it at 9. He picks up the folder. The rest is in there. The question you couldn't answer yet is on page 14. He leaves. Sofia stares at the door for approximately 4 seconds. Then she opens the folder to page 14, finds the variable she had flagged mentally as unresolved, and understands, with the specific, slightly uncomfortable sensation of being correctly read by someone she has not given permission to read her, that he saw her calculation from a single sentence. She begins working. By Wednesday afternoon, she has delivered a preliminary draft that is 12 pages longer than requested, and technically more rigorous than anything she produced at the 43rd floor, primarily because the data she has access to now does not have gaps filled in with whatever Garrett was willing to forward. Dorian reviews it in front of her, turning pages without apparent hurry, and asks 4 questions. 3 of them are the same questions she asked herself and answered. The 4th is one she had not considered, and it is a good question, precise and structural, the kind that collapses the argument around itself if it cannot be answered cleanly. She answers it. Not immediately. She takes 11 seconds, which she spends looking at the middle distance between them, running the logic through. Then she answers. Something in his expression shifts. Not warmth, not approval. Recognition, perhaps. The particular attention of someone who did not expect the calculation to hold, and is updating accordingly. This is how they work. Not companionably, not with ease. With a friction that is not hostile, but is not comfortable either. She pushes back on his assumptions, when the data supports it. He questions her methodology without deference to the fact that she is 27, and he is the man whose name is on the building. Neither of them apologizes for being right. It is the most honest professional interaction she has had in 2 years, and she does not examine that too closely. What she does examine, with increasing attention she cannot fully redirect, is the floor. The first anomaly is negligible, considered alone. The week of the 19th, a virus moves through the building with the systematic persistence of something that has mapped the ventilation system. By Tuesday, a third of the 43rd floor is working from home. By Wednesday, the kitchen on the 48th is missing 4 of its usual occupants and has been restocked with a volume of throat lozenges that suggests someone in facilities has made a logistical judgment. Sofia counts 8 visible empty desks on her floor alone when she arrives Thursday morning. She also counts 0 empty desks on the 56th. Aldrich and the 3 other senior members of Dorian's executive operations team arrive at the same hour they always do. They move through the building with the same brisk economic precision. Not one of them sounds hoarse. Not one carries the slight orbital heaviness of disrupted sleep or a compromised immune response. Sofia knows what those things look like. She has been watching people with analytic attention since childhood, and she knows the texture of someone who is managing symptoms. None of them are managing anything. She files it. The second anomaly happens in the conference room on Friday afternoon. A senior executive named Rourke is signing off on a subsidiary document when the edge of the paper opens a clean, precise cut across the side of his index finger. It bleeds. Not dramatically, a paper cut, categorically, but visibly enough that the room notices, and Rourke accepts the small packet of tissues someone slides toward him with a murmur about occupational hazards that draws a brief round of dry amusement. Sofia is seated at the far end of the table. She works through the laughter with her eyes on the numbers. 20 minutes later, when Rourke reaches across her for the consolidated brief, and his hand passes briefly through the lamplight at her side of the table, she looks at his finger without planning to. The cut is gone. Not bandaged. Not covered. Simply absent. The skin unbroken and unmarked. As clean as if the paper cut had happened to a different hand belonging to a different person 3 weeks ago. She looks at the lamp. She looks at the angle of the light. She measures the distance between where Rourke is sitting and the nearest direct light source and determines, without satisfaction, that the illumination is perfectly adequate, and she did not misread what she saw. She looks back at her numbers. The third anomaly does not occur during business hours. Sofia is working late, not unusually so, when she takes the service stairwell down to the building's lower archive floor to pull a physical document that has not been digitized. It is a minor errand, the kind that takes 8 minutes and produces a mild, familiar irritation at institutions that have not fully committed to the 21st century. She is on her way back, folder tucked under her arm, when she turns into the dim connecting corridor between the archive room and the main elevator bank. The man walking toward her is one of Dorian's senior staff, a quiet, precise individual who has exchanged perhaps 40 words with Sofia in total, and whose name she has learned is Theron. He is looking down at his phone. He passes through the intersection of the corridor and the single overhead fluorescent that flickers slightly, a maintenance ticket waiting to be filed, and for one fraction of a second, his eyes catch the light. Not in the way human eyes catch light. Golden. Flat and reflective, and entirely, specifically wrong. The optic response of something that does not belong in a human iris. There and gone in the time it takes the light to stop flickering and restabilize. Theron does not look up. He turns left at the junction, and his footsteps recede at the same measured pace they arrived with. Sofia stands at the intersection for a full beat. Then she walks to the elevator, rides it to 56, and sits down at her desk. She does not dismiss what she saw. She is not built for dismissal. She is built for filing, and filing requires acknowledging the existence of the thing being filed. She pulls out the notepad she keeps for variables that do not yet have a column, the one she uses when the data point is real, but the framework to place it in hasn't been constructed yet. She writes, Optical reflex anomaly, T. Low light corridor, not a lighting error. She turns to the next page and finds, in the documents Dorian gave her 3 days ago, a line item she noticed, but did not flag because there was no immediate reason to. A source account code embedded in the acquisition's secondary financing chain, referenced once in a footnote, and nowhere else in the document. It belongs to no entity she can locate in any accessible registry. It has no name attached, no corporate structure, no jurisdiction code. She copies it to the notepad, exactly as written, below the optical anomaly, below the cut that healed. She does not know what it means yet, but she does not throw the page away. What she does not see, at the same hour, is what is happening to her work on the shared servers of the 43rd floor. The project files she built over 22 months, still technically accessible under her old credentials during the transition window, their timestamps quietly, surgically rewritten. Versions she submitted on Monday appear in the system logs as submitted on Thursday, past the internal deadlines that no longer apply to her because she is no longer on that floor, but which existed when they were filed, and which now, retroactively, she appears to have missed. She does not see Mara Calloway log off the subsidiary system at 9:58 p.m. On the same night, Sofia sits at her new desk, writing things in a notepad that has no framework yet. She does not see the message that Mara sends, encrypted and brief, to a contact saved only as an initial in her phone. She sees none of it. But somewhere in the 56th floor's cooling silence, with a code copied from a footnote sitting below 2 anomalies she cannot yet explain, Sofia Vane is already doing what she has always done, reading the pattern before she knows what it belongs to, archiving the signal before she knows it is a signal. The building holds its breath around her. Outside, the city performs its indifference. 43 floors below, in the empty archive of a woman's 2-year professional record, someone is quietly rewriting the story of what Sofia built and when. She does not know it yet, but she will. The disagreement begins on a Tuesday and does not resolve until Thursday afternoon, and in the space between those 2 points, Sofia learns something she did not anticipate learning about Dorian Ashveil. He does not concede to comfort. He does not concede to hierarchy or precedent, or the institutional gravity of being the most senior person in any room he occupies. He concedes to evidence, only to evidence, and he requires that the evidence be airtight, not persuasive, not compelling, not supported by reasonable inference. Airtight. The kind of case that can be taken apart, bolt by bolt, and found structurally sound at every level. It is the most demanding professional standard she has ever been held to. It is also the first one that has felt like a genuine standard, rather than a performance of rigor designed to slow things down. The point of contention is the debt exposure ceiling on the Carver Group's subsidiary portfolio. Dorian's position, derived from the existing framework used across every prior acquisition in this category, sets the ceiling at 22% of gross asset value. It is defensible, historically consistent, and wrong. Not catastrophically wrong. The kind of wrong that costs 8 to 11% of projected return over a 30-month window, silently, the way imprecise instruments lose accuracy by degrees rather than all at once. Sofia identifies it on Monday evening. She spends 3 hours rebuilding the model from the liability exposure side rather than the asset side. Not standard practice, something Garrett would have flagged with a marginal note about unnecessary complexity. And by 10 o'clock, she has a clean, documented case for a ceiling of 17%, with the delta in projected return calculated to 3 decimal places. She presents it to Dorian on Tuesday morning. He reads it without speaking for 4 minutes. Then he says, "The historical framework accounts for sector volatility at 22. The historical framework was built on a sample that excludes the last 2 cycles," Sofia says. "The sector profile has shifted. The volatility at 22 worked in a different interest rate environment. I've modeled both scenarios." He looks at her. "Show me the rate sensitivity table." She shows him. He is quiet for a long moment. The assumption on page 6 overstates the exposure in year 2. It doesn't. That figure accounts for the deferred liability in the secondary holding structure. It's in the footnote. He flips back, reads the footnote, does not respond immediately, which she has learned is not the same as conceding. "I'll review it overnight," he says. On Wednesday, he returns with 3 counterpoints, precise and genuinely challenging, the kind that require her to sit with them rather than deflect, to take 40 minutes between sessions working through each one methodically before she walks back into his office. 2 she answers cleanly. The 3rd requires her to rebuild a section of the model with a corrected input assumption. She does it that afternoon. She does not ask for more time. She returns at 4:15 and places the revised table on his desk. He reviews it in silence. The office holds the particular compressed stillness of a building winding down around a floor that never does, and in that quiet, she can hear the precise, unhurried rhythm of pages turning and the faint scratch of a pen making a notation she cannot see. She stands at the corner of the desk and does not fill the silence. Dorian does not use silence to perform discomfort. It is simply the sound of him thinking. He sets the pen down. 17%, he says. Not, "You were right." Not, "Good work." Just the number, delivered with the flat finality of something that has been measured and found accurate. She nods once. He is already reading the next document when she leaves. In the corridor outside, she stops walking for approximately 2 seconds, for no reason she intends to examine, before she keeps moving. The security summons arrives Thursday morning, 14 hours later. Sofia is at her desk at 7:40, when her access to the shared document system produces an error she has not encountered before. A red-bordered notification reading, "Access suspended pending security review. Credential hold active." She opens her email. A message from Internal Security Operations, timestamped 6:12 a.m. I informs her that she has been identified in connection with a potential confidentiality protocol violation and is required to appear before the Security Review Board at 2 p.m. She reads it twice. Then she opens her physical folio and goes through it page by page, her own documents, her own notes, the printed draft with her handwritten corrections in the margins. Nothing that should not be there. At 7:58, Aldrich knocks and opens her door in the same motion. He tells her that Mr. Ashveil would like to see her. Dorian is standing at the window when she enters, looking at the city in the manner of someone who has been there for some time and has not found what they were looking for. He turns when the door closes and his eyes move to her with the focused assessment she has come to recognize as his baseline reading of any new variable in the room. You received the security notice. Yes. She remains near the door. I don't know what document they're referring to. My folio is clean. It's not your folio. He crosses to the desk and turns his monitor toward her. On the screen is a scanned image of a printed document. A competitor intelligence report. Detailed market analysis constituting proprietary information under at least 3 clauses of her employment contract, bearing the header of a firm currently on the opposing side of the Carver Group transaction. This was found in your bag during the building's routine security screening this morning, he says. The report was logged at the security station at 6:05. Sofia looks at it. She has never seen this document. She has certainly never carried it. The security screening happens at the lobby level, automated, and she was not present at 6 a.m. She arrived at 7:40, and her entry badge will confirm that. She says this, in exactly these words, without inflection. I know, he says. She waits. Someone accessed your desk after you left last night and before building entry resumed this morning. The lobby system logs physical presence, not scheduled timing. If the item was placed in your bag inside the building, the system still registers it as found on you at entry. His jaw compresses slightly along a line she has cataloged without intending to. Your credentials are being restored under my direct authorization. The board appearance is postponed 72 hours. I've communicated that the integrity of the classified project requires continuity of your access, and that any review must wait until I've completed my own assessment. Sofia absorbs this carefully. Why? She says. He looks at her without manufacturing reassurance or warmth to soften the answer. The look of someone measuring precision against speed. Because the document was planted, he says, and the person who planted it used access they should not have. I am not going to allow my investigation to be obstructed by a secondary action that should not have been possible in the first place. She holds his gaze. She is thinking, in the careful separate part of her mind, she keeps for exactly this. This could be protection. Or this could be a more sophisticated version of what Mara did to her analysis in the Meridian. Someone positioning themselves between her and the consequences of a situation they helped architect. She does not know which this is. She does not have enough data yet. Understood, she says. She goes back to her office. Her credentials work. She does not interpret that as evidence of anything except that Dorian said they would work, and they do. At 9:17 p.m., the Carver assessment is as complete as the time allows, and Sofia is the last person she is aware of on the 56th floor. She needs physical copies of 3 documents, not because she distrusts the servers, but because she now has direct, documented evidence that the servers can be altered by someone with the right access, and she will not discover on the morning of the security review that her own files have been quietly revised in her absence. The building's archive 2 floors below has a printer that produces legally admissible timestamps on physical output. She takes the service stairs, quieter than the elevator, no delay, and she can think in stairwells in a way that open spaces do not consistently allow. The server room is at the base of the building's technical infrastructure, adjacent to the archive floor. She is not going to the server room. She passes its corridor on the way to the archive, and the corridor runs at half capacity, lighting the way all technical infrastructure corridors run after 10 p.m. Functional, spare, stripped of designed environment. The server room door is propped open. 6 inches, held by something she cannot see from the hallway. She registers this as a facilities anomaly and keeps walking. Then she hears the voice. One voice. Low, unhurried, delivering the tail end of a directive. The kind of sentence that began somewhere she did not hear. She does not stop. She does not accelerate. She adjusts her angle by perhaps 4 degrees and lets her peripheral vision do what it always does. The server room door is a reinforced steel security door, rated for physical resistance, equipped with a hydraulic closure mechanism designed to overcome casual obstruction. In ordinary operation of its hardware, it cannot be held open by placing an object in the frame. The resistance is too significant. Dorian is holding it open with one hand, not braced against it, holding it, fingers wrapped loosely around the edge of the steel panel, phone pressed to his opposite ear, his posture carrying no evidence of effort. The same quality of ease he brings to standing in a corridor or reviewing a document. The hydraulic system is actively working against him. She can see the compression in the mechanism at the top of the frame. He is not noticing it. It does not require his attention. It is not worthy of his attention. Sofia keeps walking. She does not run. She does not break stride. She reaches the archive room, badges in, uses the printer, collects 3 copies with their timestamps. Her hands do not shake. She is meticulous about her hands not shaking, because shaking would constitute a response, and she has not yet determined what she is responding to. She takes the stairs back up. She exits through the lobby at 9:31 and walks 2 full blocks before she stops on the pavement, in the cold November dark, and stands completely still. The cut that closed in 20 minutes. The eyes in the corridor that caught the light the wrong way. The floor that produced no illness in a building where 1/3 of the staff had been symptomatic for a week. The code in the footnote attached to no entity in any accessible registry. And now a door. She does not construct a conclusion. She does not have the framework for a conclusion. What she has is a column of data points she has been filing under miscellaneous because they did not fit any existing category. And the understanding, arriving quietly without drama, that miscellaneous is no longer a defensible classification. These are not unrelated anomalies. They are variables in the same model, a model whose parameters she does not yet have. She thinks about James, who knew someone who knew someone, who opened a door into a building she now understands she has not fully seen. Gratitude is a kind of debt, she has always believed. You carry it toward the person who earned it until the ledger balances. She has been carrying it toward her brother for 2 years, automatic, unexamined, the way you carry things received before you were old enough to assess the terms. Standing in the November dark with copies of her own work folded under her arm, she wonders for the first time what James knew about what was behind the door he opened. She wonders what he was paid to know it. The city moves around her, indifferent and enormous. None of it is aware of her. She starts walking. The right questions, her mother used to say, pressing a hand to the side of Sofia's head when she was very small and very relentless about things that didn't add up, are always the beginning. She has the right questions now. Everything else is only a matter of time. She does not sleep. This is not unusual in itself. Sofia has a long history of nights that dissolve into work, hours that were technically rest, but functioned as extended processing time, the lights off and her mind running through models and variables with the same focused persistence it applies to everything else. But tonight is different. Tonight, she is not running models. She is running a single question in widening circles, returning to the same point with the same answer each time, until somewhere around 3 a.m, the answer solidifies from possibility into certainty, and she stops trying to qualify it. She knows what she saw. She has always known. She filed it, categorized it, applied the discipline of not concluding before the evidence reached the threshold. The threshold is reached. It has been reached for some time, and she has been maintaining the fiction of the open question because closing it opens something else, something she does not have a framework for, something that makes the planted document and the server timestamps and the 72 hours before a security board feel suddenly much smaller than the thing they are sitting inside. She arrives at the 56th floor at 6:43. Her credentials work. The floor is empty except for the low mechanical hum of infrastructure and a single desk lamp burning in the corner office at the far end. She does not go to her office. She walks to the end of the corridor and knocks once. He is already at his desk when she enters. Jacket off, the dark charcoal of his shirt rolled to the elbows, in a way that is purely functional, reading from a physical document that he sets face down without marking his place. He looks at her in the way she has catalogued as his baseline. Direct, complete, no warmth manufactured to ease the temperature of the room. She closes the door behind her. She opens her folio on the edge of his desk, and without preamble, without introduction, she begins. She moves through the anomalies in exact chronological order, not as accusations, as data, the same clean technical register she uses for acquisition risk presentations. Each point stated once, precisely, with the specific details that make it unambiguous. The absence of illness, the cut on Rourke's hand and its absence 20 minutes later, the eyes in the corridor on the archive floor. She watches his expression for the duration of this inventory and finds nothing that reads as surprise. Finds instead the particular controlled stillness she now recognizes as his version of attention. Oriented fully toward her, filing and measuring, present in a way that most people in positions of authority never quite manage. She gets to the server room. "You were holding a hydraulic-secured steel door open with one hand," she says. "The mechanism was active. You weren't exerting effort." She pauses for one beat. "I need you to tell me what you are." The silence that follows is not evasion. It is assessment. She can see it. The calibration happening behind those dark jade eyes. The calculation of exactly how much the situation demands. "Sit down," he says. "I'll stand." He looks at her for a moment. Then he nods. Once, the brief acknowledgement of someone who recognizes a position and does not intend to waste time contesting it. "What I'm going to tell you does not leave this floor. I understand. That's not a formality, Sofia." It is the first time he has used her first name. The air in the room adjusts slightly around the fact of it. "I understand," she says again. And she does. He tells her. Not with embellishment, not with the performance of revelation. In the same direct register she used to present her anomalies. Measured, sequential, sufficiently detailed. Shifters exist. Have always existed, beneath and within and alongside the human world, in absolute concealment that is maintained not by chance, but by structure, by hierarchy, by the kind of institutional discipline that makes the loyalty of his executive floor suddenly, completely legible. The Ashveil Capital is not simply a corporate institution that employs shifters. It is a pack infrastructure, a center of resources and influence built across 4 decades by a lineage she now understands the word alpha was not a metaphor for. Dorian is not a metaphor. Mara Calloway belongs to a rival faction. A smaller and older coalition that has spent years attempting to fracture the pack's corporate holdings from the inside, not through confrontation, which would require acknowledgement, but through erosion, document trails quietly altered, alliance structures slowly compromised, resources diverted through accounts that do not appear in any accessible registry, and that leave no fingerprints that a shifter investigator could follow, because the concealment was designed specifically for that kind of pursuit, not for Sofia's kind. She hears this, and the Carver Group's secondary financing chain footnote surfaces immediately. The account code she copied to the notepad in Part 2, without yet knowing why. The entity with no name and no jurisdiction. She does not say this out loud. She files it. "The classified operation," she says. "You assigned it to me because I'm human. Human analysis cannot be influenced by pack pressure. Shifters in my organization, even the loyal ones, exist within the hierarchy. Their perception of the data is not fully separable from the social weight of the context it exists in." He meets her eyes. "I needed someone who would see exactly what was in the numbers. Nothing else. The irregularity in the meridian presentation," she says. "The variance I flagged. Was Mara's transfer account. One of them. You surfaced it without knowing what you were looking at." Something moves briefly across his expression. Not quite anger, not quite anything she has a name for. That is why she destroyed you in that room. Not opportunism, containment. The word lands like something dropped from a height. Sofia had known this, structurally, in the same way she had known about the server room door. The data was always there, waiting for the conclusion she had been careful not to reach before it was supported. Hearing it confirmed does not change the content of the knowledge. It changes the weight of it. She breathes through the weight. She does not let it stop her. "Show me the rest," she says. He opens the secondary drive. The records are financial, transfer logs, contract attachments, a chain of communications that required significant effort to reconstruct and is presented now in clean summary form. Sofia reads with the focused velocity she applies to everything that contains numbers, and within 4 minutes she has the architecture of it. The external connection, the mechanism of the arrangement, the timeline, and the name, James Vane. She reads it once. She reads the row of data beneath it, the date of the arrangement, the nature of the favor exchange, the specific instruction that his sister, Sofia, be positioned inside Ashveil Capital as a human asset that Mara's faction could leverage or discard as the situation required. She was the bargaining piece. The favor was not large. A single contract routed through James's firm, a commission that would have looked like an ordinary piece of business luck to anyone who wasn't looking for the source. He didn't need much. James never needed much. He had always been economical about his ambitions, aiming precisely at what he could actually obtain, no higher. She had always read this as realism. She keeps her eyes on the screen. The chain of small memories that has been unsupooling since last night arrives at its end point. The gratitude she carried for 2 years. The phone call. The door he opened. The details she mentioned with something close to fondness to a colleague in a hallway on her second week. At least someone opened a door. She had believed in it the way you believe in something received before you were equipped to examine the terms. She had never examined the terms. There are no terms. There was an arrangement. She was the currency. The office is completely quiet. Outside, the city is gray and indifferent in the early morning, and the glass catches its light in the long, fractured angles she has been noting every morning for 2 years without knowing what kind of building she was entering. She closes the document. She straightens. The 72 hours, she says. The postponement you issued to the security board. Still active. I want them. Dorian watches her. For what purpose? Mara's operation ran through the company's financial infrastructure for years. That means the trails exist in the data. Transfer anomalies, account code irregularities, timing patterns that deviate from legitimate transaction behavior. She closes her folio, opens it again to the clean page at the back. A shifter investigator looking for those trails would rely on instinct to narrow the field. I don't have instinct. I have methodology. She looks at him directly. I will find every transaction she ran through these systems. Not because I can feel where they are, because I know what irregular data looks like in a financial model and I know how to make it visible. The silence that follows is different from the others. Not assessment. Something that might be in a different register. Recognition. You would be building a case against the person who just had a document planted in your bag, he says, who already demonstrated willingness to use you as a target. Yes. The Security Review Board will still convene at the end of 72 hours regardless of what you produce. I know. I'll be ready for it. She holds his gaze. Keep my access active. Don't interfere with what I find. Let me work. He is quiet for a moment that she does not rush. Your access stays active, he says. The 72 hours are yours. She nods once and moves toward the door. Sofia. She stops. Does not turn immediately. What you find, he says, needs to be complete. She will not make the same mistake twice. She turns then, just enough to look at him over her shoulder, the lamp catching the angle of her face and the flat, certain quality of her expression. The expression of someone who has just reclassified themselves from a variable in someone else's model to the person building the model. Neither will I. She works through the night and into the next day with a precision that is entirely her own. No borrowed urgency, no external pressure shaping the pace. Just the data and the methodology and the particular relentless quality she brings to problems that other people have given up on as too complex to solve cleanly. The account code from the footnote, copied into her notepad on the 56th floor the week before, is the first thread. She pulls it. It connects to a secondary routing structure embedded in the acquisition's financing chain. A dormant account that receives fractional transfers too small to trigger automated compliance flags, but consistent enough in their intervals to be identifiable once you know the signature you're looking for. She knows the signature. She built the framework to identify exactly this kind of pattern in the Carver Group analysis, without knowing she was also describing Mara's method of concealment. The irony is not lost on her. She does not let it slow her down. By hour 14, she has 4 confirmed transaction chains. By hour 20, she has 9, spanning 18 months of operating records. By the time the city outside has completed a full rotation from dark to gray to the hard winter light of morning, she has a document that is 27 pages long, internally consistent, evidence to the transaction level, and entirely damning. She prints 3 copies with full timestamps. She does not feel relief. She does not feel triumph. She feels the particular flat, clear quality of a calculation that has arrived at its correct output. No residue, no remainder, no variable unaccounted for. What she feels beneath that, and only briefly, in the single unguarded moment between printing the last page and placing it in the folio, is the specific cold weight of what it means that her brother knew this building had teeth before she walked through its door, and sent her through it anyway. She presses her hand flat on the desk for a moment. Then she picks up the folio. She has 72 hours, and she has used 23 of them. She will deliver 1 copy of the document to Dorian. She will keep 1 for herself, and she will spend the remaining time ensuring the 3rd copy is stored somewhere that exists entirely outside this building's infrastructure, because she has learned, in the past weeks, exactly what happens to documents inside these walls when the wrong person decides they should not exist. Mara Calloway has spent years making things disappear quietly. Sofia Vane is about to make something impossible to disappear. The Security Review Board convenes at 2 p.m. On the 3rd day, and it is the shortest formal proceeding Sofia has attended in her professional life. She arrives at the boardroom on the 47th floor 7 minutes early, folio in hand, dressed in the dark gray blazer and charcoal trousers she reserves for presentations that require other people to take her seriously before she has opened her mouth. The 3-member board is already seated. They have, she will learn later, already received the document she submitted to the Chief of Security at 6:45 that morning. 27 pages, time-stamped, evidence to the transaction level, covering 18 months of financial irregularities traceable to Mara Calloway's operation within the company's own infrastructure. The board member on the left opens the session. The board member in the center closes it 11 minutes later. The investigation against Sofia Vane is formally concluded. Credential hold lifted. All records of the pending review flagged for internal correction. The document planted in her bag is noted in the session record as unattributed pending ongoing investigation, which is the language institutions use when they know exactly what happened and are managing the order of consequences carefully. Sofia accepts this. She did not come here for immediate attribution. She came here to be clean before the summit. She is clean. She thanks the board. She takes the elevator up. The Ashveil Capital Annual Investor Summit occupies the entire 49th floor ballroom and the 2 breakout spaces adjacent to it. 300 attendees, board members, international partners, managing directors from the European and Pacific offices, and a contained section of financial press operating under non-disclosure agreements that the company's legal team issues with the calm efficiency of people who have done this many times and encountered no surprises. The event is the most photographed, most monitored, and most politically weighted date on the corporate calendar. It is the room in which the company's version of itself is performed for the people whose continued belief in that version constitutes the foundation of its operating power. Mara Calloway is presenting in the afternoon plenary session, 3rd speaker, following the quarterly overview from the CFO and an infrastructure update from the Pacific Division head. Her name is in the printed program. Her name is on the room's digital schedule, projected in clean sans serif above the stage. Sofia's name is not on anything. She sits in the second-to-last row on the room's east side, not hidden, simply occupying a position from which the entire stage is visible without requiring anyone on the stage to locate her first. Her credentials are valid. She is an analyst on an active classified project under executive supervision, and that designation grants her access to any company event on company premises. The woman at the registration desk scans her badge without comment. Sofia takes a lanyard and a program and finds her seat. The first 2 presentations proceed at their designed length. Sofia does not take notes on them. She reviews the 3-page summary she prepared this morning. Not for content, she has the content, but for sequence. The order in which the information lands matters as much as the information itself. She has thought about this for most of the previous night, mapping the presentation the way she maps financial risk. Which point creates the most instability if it is the first one introduced? Which one is strongest as an anchor, where the logical momentum builds itself, and where it requires explicit support? She is methodical about the order of things. She has always been methodical. When Mara steps onto the stage, Sofia is ready. Mara opens with the metrics that headline her division's performance. Polished, clean, delivered with the composed authority of someone who has stood at this specific podium many times and understands its geometry. The room has the particular focused attention of 300 people who are being told numbers they care about, and Mara inhabits it with ease. Not performance, precisely, but something close to it. The ease of someone who has prepared for every variable, except the one currently sitting in the second-to-last row on the east side. Sofia waits until the end of the second slide. She stands. Every institution of this type has a formal contestation mechanism embedded in its governance documentation, a procedural right for credentialed employees to raise a technical challenge during presentations affecting classified or contested operations. It exists because the people who wrote the governance documentation believed that accuracy mattered and that the structure to protect it should be on record. It is never used. The political cost of invoking it is significant, and the kind of person willing to pay that cost is rare. Sofia raises her hand and states the protocol identifier in full. The room does not go quiet gradually. It goes quiet at once, 300 people recognizing simultaneously that something has deviated from the program in a way that the program did not account for. Mara looks at her from the stage. The expression does not break, does not flicker. The marble quality holds, absolute and unbothered. And only Sofia, who has been reading Mara Calloway's face since the meridian, sees the exact fraction of a second recalibration that happens behind those gray eyes the moment she identifies who is standing. The board chair at the front table acknowledges the protocol. Sofia has the floor. She does not walk to the stage. She speaks from where she stands, and her voice carries the way she has always made her voice carry. Not loud, but precise, with the specific acoustic clarity of someone who chooses words for weight rather than volume. The analysis presented in slides 1 and 2 contains metrics derived from a financial structure that includes irregularities I have documented in a formal report submitted to Internal Security Operations this morning at 6:45. I am requesting the opportunity to present those findings to this room. A beat. The board chair looks left, then right. Looks at the document on the table in front of him. The summary copy Sofia submitted, which the security division forwarded to board leadership as required by protocol, which she knew they would. She had factored this into the timing. He nods. What follows is not a performance. It is 22 minutes of technical demonstration, conducted with the flat, clean precision of someone who built the analysis from source data, and has not a single number she cannot defend to the exact document it came from. Sofia does not raise her voice. She does not appeal to the room's sympathies or its outrage. She presents the account code structure, the transfer anomaly pattern, the 18-month chain of irregularities mapped against the company's own compliance records. She presents the forged timestamps on the server records, her own project files, with before and after states documented side by side. She presents the communication thread traced to James Vane through 3 layers of indirect financial transfer, the contract commission, the arrangement, the date. She presents the irregularity from the meridian, the variance in the weighted index that Mara had presented as her own analysis on the day she stripped Sofia's name from the framework in front of 40 people. That irregularity is here now, on a screen in front of 300, with its full architecture visible, what it was, what it belonged to, why Mara could not allow it to reach this room intact. The data destroys itself, which is to say, it destroys Mara. Sofia does not have to editorialize. She simply makes the structure visible, and the structure is what it is. When she finishes, the room has the particular texture of people recalibrating around a significant new center of gravity. Not chaos. These are people trained to process uncomfortable information at volume, but a collective reorientation that is audible in the quality of silence, the held postures, the specific stillness of people who are deciding what this information requires of them. Mara steps forward. Her voice is even, controlled. She addresses the board chair directly. The findings presented by Miss Vane were produced under the direct supervision of the CEO, she says. The governance documentation on classified projects specifies that material produced under executive supervision requires independent verification before it can be submitted as investigative evidence in a proceeding against a named senior employee. The conflict of interest is structural, not personal. A pause, brief and measured. I am invoking Clause 14 of the Classified Operations Protocol. Independent review is required before this material can be entered into record. It is a real clause. Sofia has read it. It is embedded in the governance documentation precisely where Mara's legal team would have placed it, years ago, as a contingency for exactly this kind of moment. A mechanism designed to appear as legitimate procedural protection and to function, for anyone outside the pack hierarchy, as exactly that. What Mara is actually doing, what every shifter in this room understands she is doing, is invoking the protection of pack hierarchy, placing herself under the authority structure and demanding that the alpha act within its formal constraints or expose it entirely. It is the last available move on the board. It is, Sofia recognizes, a well-constructed one. The room waits. Dorian stands. He has been seated at the executive table to the right of the stage for the duration of the session. He stood for no other speaker. He has not moved with visible urgency or emotion. He stands now with the same quality of motion he brings to everything. Complete, unhurried, carrying the weight of his presence the way he always carries it, as though it has simply always been in the room and is only now making itself apparent. He does not look at Mara. He addresses the board. Clause 14 applies to material produced exclusively within the supervised project environment and submitted without independent verification. His voice is level, not loud, filling the room the way a well-constructed sentence fills a page. The material submitted by Miss Vane was delivered to Internal Security Operations at 6:45 this morning, 7 hours before the classified project's review cycle opened. The timestamp is in the board's documentation. Independent receipt precedes the project window. Clause 14 does not apply. He turns to the full room. Mara Calloway's contract with Ashveil Capital is terminated effective immediately. For documented violation of confidentiality protocols, financial conduct standards, and operational integrity requirements under Sections 3, 11, and 19 of her executive agreement. Legal will process the formal separation. He does not pause for the weight of this to settle, because he does not deliver things in order to observe their landing. The Classified Acquisition Project's analytical foundation has been provided by Sofia Vane, operating independently and under her own professional authority. She moves to senior analyst designation under direct executive leadership, effective today. For 300 people in this room, it is a corporate announcement. Clean, procedurally complete, the kind of executive decision this man is known for making without ceremony or explanation. For every shifter in the room, and there are more than Sofia currently knows, it is something else. Something older than the corporate language it was delivered in. Something that carries the specific and irreversible weight of a public declaration made by an alpha in front of the full hierarchy. A designation that does not unchoose itself and does not require anyone's approval after the fact. Mara's composure does not break. It is too refined for that. But she removes her hands from the podium and places them at her sides. And something behind those gray eyes goes very still, in the manner of something that has accepted a final outcome. She steps back from the stage. The session does not end in chaos. It ends the way powerful rooms absorb powerful information, with the careful, controlled continuation of institutional form. The board chair resumes order. The remaining scheduled speakers are notified of the adjusted timeline. People move toward the breakout spaces with the brisk, purposeful movement of professionals processing significant information while maintaining the appearance of forward momentum. Sofia remains in her row until the main current of the room has redistributed. She closes her folio. She straightens the lanyard around her neck. Her hands are steady. She is meticulous about her hands being steady, and they are. She is standing to leave when she becomes aware of Dorian at the end of her row. He does not approach. He stands at the aisle with his hands at his sides in that particular stillness she now reads as accurately as she reads anything, fully present, fully oriented toward her, giving her the choice of the space between them. She walks to the end of the row. They stand in the emptying room with 3 feet between them and the noise of 300 people redistributing around them. And he looks at her with those dark jade eyes in the winter light coming through the tall ballroom windows and says nothing, because he does not use words when the fact of his presence is the thing he means to communicate. The timestamp, she says. You knew I would submit before the project window. I knew you would find a way to make it uncontestable. A beat. I didn't specify the method. She looks at him. You declared me senior analyst in front of 300 people, she says. Not an accusation. A fact being processed in real time, the way she processes all facts, with the attention they are owed. Yes, without asking. You walked into my office at 6:43 in the morning and told me you were going to build a case that would hold in any proceeding against the person who had spent weeks trying to destroy you. The line of his jaw holds that familiar compression. I don't ask people to accept designations they have already earned. The ballroom is nearly empty now. The winter light falls in long angles across the empty chairs, and somewhere outside the glass the city continues its indifferent motion, entirely unaware of what has just been decided in this room and what it will cost in the months that follow. Sofia holds his gaze for a moment that she does not rush, and neither does he. The Clause 14 argument, she says. She built that contingency years ago. Yes, she expected this moment. She expected a version of it. His voice carries something she has not heard in it before. Not warmth, precisely, but the absence of the usual controlled distance. She did not expect you. Sofia looks at the empty stage. At the podium where Mara stood 20 minutes ago, with the marble composure of someone who had calculated every outcome. At the place in the room where the pack hierarchy pressure was meant to force Dorian into silence or exposure, and where instead the ground had simply shifted beneath it and refused to hold. Neither did I, she says quietly, not to him, to the room, or to herself, or to the 2 years of mornings she arrived at this building in the early dark, believing she was entering something she understood. She picks up her folio. She walks toward the door, and the winter light follows her all the way to the threshold. The regulatory filing takes 4 days to prepare correctly, not because the evidence is insufficient. It has been sufficient since the morning Sofia printed 3 time-stamped copies on the archive floor's printer and distributed them with the deliberate care of someone who understands that documents only protect you if they exist in places that cannot be quietly revised. The 4 days are for precision, for ensuring that every transaction chain is sourced to its original record, that every account code is cross-referenced against accessible public registries, that the document arriving at the Financial Conduct Authority's Intake Division is so internally consistent that the only available response is action. Sofia submits it on a Thursday morning. She submits it herself, not through legal, not through Dorian's office, not through any channel that runs inside this building's infrastructure. She walks into the regulatory office on the 4th floor of a government building 6 blocks from Ashveil Capital, presents her credentials, and places the physical document in the hands of the intake officer with the steady matter-of-factness of someone completing a task that has been clearly defined since the moment she decided to build the case. The intake officer asks if she would like confirmation of receipt. She says yes. She waits for the timestamp. She places the confirmation in her folio beside the remaining copy of the document. She walks back to the office in the cold morning air, and the city moves around her the way it always does. Indifferent and enormous and entirely unaware of what has just been set in motion inside one of its glass towers. She does not feel relief walking back. What she feels is the specific flat clarity of a calculation completed. No residue, no open variable. The work is done. The rest belongs to a process larger than her, and she trusts the process not because institutions are reliable, but because she built the submission to be irresistible to it. Accuracy is its own form of force. She has always believed this. James tries to reach her 3 times before she responds. The first attempt is a text message. The morning after the summit, 8 words that she reads once and does not answer. The second is a phone call 2 days later, which she declines before it reaches the second ring. The third is a voicemail, 4 minutes long, which she listens to in full while sitting at her kitchen table on a Sunday morning with both hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that has gone cold. She listens to all 4 minutes. She owes him that much. Not forgiveness, not reconsideration, but the basic attention of someone willing to hear what the other person has to say before the account closes. James's voice in the voicemail has the particular quality of a man who has been rehearsing and still cannot find the right structure for what he needs to say. He moves through justifications and backtracks through them. He lands on something that sounds like regret, which may even be genuine. She is not positioned to know, and she has decided that the question of its genuineness is no longer hers to carry. She texts him back that afternoon. 1 sentence. She will meet him once, in person. He should not interpret the meeting as an opening. The cafe is 3 blocks from her apartment, not close to his office or to the Ashveil building. Neutral ground, her geography, her terms. She is already seated when he arrives. He looks older than the last time she saw him, which was 6 weeks ago, at a family dinner where he was relaxed and funny and present in the way James is always present, taking up the right amount of space, saying the right things, leaving no rough edge for anything to catch on. She looks at him and thinks, she knew this person. She knew his laugh and his habits, and the way he borrows things without asking, and returns them without mentioning it. She knew him the way you know a person you grew up beside, accumulated in small details and shared history, not examined but simply there. Load-bearing and unquestioned the way structural walls are unquestioned until you discover the building was not built to last. James sits down. He does not order anything. He says her name. He starts to say something else. She does not let him build to it. I know what the arrangement was, she says. Her voice is the same voice she uses for everything. Level, precise, carrying no surplus emotion. I know the date it was made, and what was exchanged and what you expected the outcome to be. She wraps both hands around the coffee cup. I'm not here to receive an explanation. I'm here because you're my brother, and this deserved a real conversation instead of a text message. James's expression moves through several configurations. He lands on something that looks like relief. The relief of someone who expected to be shouted at and wasn't. And then immediately looks ashamed of the relief. Sofia, I didn't think it would. You didn't think, she says. Simple. Factual. Not a cruelty. Just the thing that is true. You saw an opportunity, and you didn't think past the transaction. That's not new. I've watched you do it for 30 years with things that cost other people, and not you. She looks at him directly. This time it cost me. The cafe is warm. Outside, the street is busy with the midday movement of people who have no idea they are sharing a city block with a conversation that is quietly, permanently closing something. I can fix it, James says. Whatever you need me to, there's nothing to fix. The regulatory submission has been filed. The evidence is in the record, and it includes the transfer to your firm. She watches his face. You'll receive a formal inquiry. I recommend you cooperate fully. The cooperation will be noted. She picks up the cup. That's all the advice I have for you. He stares at her. That's it? He says. Not anger. Something rawer than that. Something that sounds like a man who wanted to be forgiven and has just understood that the conversation he came here to have is not the conversation that is occurring. That's it. She sets the cup down. I'm not angry, James. I want to be clear about that, because I know you'll carry it better if you believe I'm angry. I'm not. I'm finished. She considers the word. It's the right one. We knew each other. We won't, going forward. Those are the consequences of the choice you made. They are not disproportionate. She stands. She picks up her folio and her coat, and she looks at him one last time. The familiar face. The older version of the boy she grew up alongside, and she memorizes it without sentimentality, because Sofia Vane memorizes things. That is simply what she does, and this is the last time she will see this particular version of this person. She walks out into the cold. She does not look back. Not because she is performing the gesture of not looking back, but because she has no question requiring the view behind her to answer. The resolution with Dorian is not a scene. It is not a moment with a before and after. It accumulates, in the way that real things accumulate, across the days that follow the summit, in the space of two people who now know exactly what the other is capable of, and have chosen to be in the same room with that knowledge, rather than away from it. He does not declare anything. She does not ask him to. What exists between them is built on what each of them has observed in the other, under conditions that do not permit performance. She has seen him hold a door with one hand and a corporate structure with the other. She has seen him tell her the full truth when it would have been simpler and safer not to. She has seen the controlled fury in his expression when she described what was done to her work, and she has recognized it, that specific quality of anger that is not self-interest and is not performance, but the unguarded response of someone who finds injustice genuinely intolerable and does something about it rather than filing the sentiment away. He has seen her walk into his office at dawn with a folio of anomalies and ask the exact right question in the exact right order. He has seen her build a case in 23 hours that held in a room of 300 people against a woman who had been constructing her defenses for years. He has seen her absorb a betrayal that ran 14 layers deep into her personal history and redirect the energy of it entirely into precision. Neither of them is under illusion about what the other is. Neither of them is interested in illusion. One evening, 10 days after the summit, they are in his office reviewing the regulatory response timeline. There will be an inquiry. There will be depositions. There will be the long, careful process of institutional consequence unfolding at the pace institutions move. And he is standing at the window with the city spread below him, and she is at the corner of his desk, and he says without turning, "You're staying." She looks up from the document. "On the project," he says. Then, after a beat, "Here." She considers it. Not whether the answer is yes, which she has known for some time, but how to say the yes in a way that means exactly what she intends it to mean. No more and no less. She thinks of the woman who used to arrive at the 43rd floor before the cleaning crew finished, invisible and precise and building frameworks for rooms she was not invited into. She thinks of the morning she arrived at the 56th floor and knocked on a closed door without a plan for what would happen next, with nothing except the knowledge that she had reached the limit of what she could understand from the outside. "Yes," she says. The word is simple. It carries everything she means it to carry. He turns from the window. In the lamplight, his eyes are the color she has catalogued most accurately at this hour, dark jade with the amber quality that surfaces in low warmth, deep and still. He looks at her with that complete, unhurried attention he brings to everything that matters to him. He crosses the room. The distance between them closes without drama, without ceremony. His hand finds her jaw, careful, deliberate, as though she is something precise and worth not rushing, and he kisses her in the manner of someone who has been very patient and has decided that patience has reached its natural end. She lets herself be in it, not managed, not performing the absence of feeling, simply present in the warmth of it, which is different from every warmth she has catalogued in this building. Not the heat of ambition, or the warmth of a well-built argument landing correctly. Something older and quieter than those. Something that has no column in any model she has built, and which she is, for the first time in her adult life, choosing not to file. When he pulls back, his forehead rests against hers. The city is dark and indifferent outside the glass. She can feel the steady rhythm of his breathing. "You should have told me what you were," she says, before any of it. "Yes," he says. Just that. He does not manufacture an excuse. She pulls back enough to look at him. "Don't do it again." Something moves at the corner of his mouth. That shape she catalogued from the first week. Not quite a smile. The shape held back. He holds her gaze. "No," he says. "I won't." The regulatory files arrive on a Wednesday, forwarded by the inquiry team as part of the formal evidence exchange. Sofia receives them at her desk on the 56th floor, opens the secure transfer portal, and begins the review with the methodical patience she brings to all document review. Page by page, in sequence, filing each item against the mental index of things she already knows, and things she does not. She finds it 41 pages from the end. It is not a revelation she was anticipating. She was not looking for it. She was looking for corroboration of the transfer chains she had already documented, and she finds that too. But 41 pages from the end, there is a payment record that stops her hand over the mouse. The account code. Her account code. The one she copied into the notepad on the 56th floor on a Thursday evening in November, filed under variables without a framework, taken from a single footnote in the Carver Group's secondary financing chain. She stares at it in the document for a long moment. It is here, in Mara's records, but not as Mara's account. Not as a holding vehicle or a shell entity Mara created to conceal her operation. It appears as an origin, the account from which funds traveled to Mara's own concealment structure, the source of 12 years of financial support that predates Mara's senior position at Ashveil by 3 years and her junior position by 6. Someone was funding Mara long before Mara had anything to offer them. Sofia opens every available registry, public financial records, regulatory databases, cross-jurisdictional company filings, and runs the account code through all of them in sequence. She has run this search before, in November, in a different context. The result is the same. The entity attached to this account does not exist in any public record in any territory. No name, no registered structure, no jurisdiction, no filing history. The account code itself appears in 2 documents in the entire world, as far as she can determine. The footnote in the Carver Group financing chain, which she found first, and these records, which she is reading now. 12 years. She runs the transfer timeline from the beginning. The first payment predates the Ashveil Capital's current corporate structure. It predates Dorian's tenure. It predates, she realizes with a specific cold precision, her own entry into the workforce. Someone began funding an infiltration campaign inside a PAC organization 12 years ago. With knowledge of that organization's internal structure, with sufficient resources to sustain it across more than a decade, with patience and sophistication that belonged to something operating on a longer timeline than a rival faction, a corporate competitor, or any ordinary adversary she can construct a profile for. She picks up the notepad. The entry is still there in her own handwriting, from November. The code, exactly copied. She goes to Dorian's office. He is at his desk. He looks up when she enters and reads her expression. Not alarm, but the specific quality of focused stillness she brings to problems that matter, and sets down what he is holding. She opens the notepad to the page, places it on his desk, sets the regulatory document beside it, the relevant page paper-clipped to the top. She watches him read. She watches the shift happen in his expression. The same shift she has cataloged through weeks of working in close proximity, the compression at the jaw, the quality of attention that intensifies past its usual register when something has reached him underneath the controlled surface. He reads the payment timeline. He reads the 12-year span. He turns back to the account code. He is quiet for a long moment. This code, he says. His voice carries a flatness she has not heard from him before. Not coldness, but the tone of something encountering the edge of its own knowledge and finding the edge closer than expected. It doesn't belong to any faction I know, any structure I've encountered. She nods. She had already known this from his reaction, but confirmation is confirmation. The first transfer predates your tenure, she says, by 4 years. Whoever this is, they knew about the PAC before most of your current senior staff did. They funded Mara's infiltration from outside. They knew about her. They knew about this building. She picks up the notepad, and they were referenced in the Carver Group's financing chain. She lets that land for a moment, which means they are currently active, not historical. Now, outside, the city operates in its evening configuration, millions of people in their ordinary lives, none of them aware that inside a glass tower on the 47th floor, a woman has just located the beginning of a trail that extends further back and further out than any investigation currently underway is looking. Dorian's eyes move from the document to her face. The lamplight catches the jade depth of them, and what she sees there is not the focused calm of a man who has a response prepared. It is the rare and specific look of a man who does not know the answer, who is, perhaps for the first time in her experience of him, at the actual boundary of what he knows. Then we find them, he says. Sofia looks at the account code on the page. 12 years old and invisible to every available search. An entity with no name, no structure, no fingerprint in any registry, except the 2 documents she found because she copies things that don't fit into existing categories and keeps them in a notepad until the framework arrives. The framework has arrived. "We will," she says. "I know where the trail starts, where the